Before we get started, I do want to make one quick comment that Bob Frankrone did bring in a couple models over here to take a look at. They might be open loads. I'm not sure. It's a good chance, though.
Yeah.
So if you're in the room, take a look at those. Barbara, would you please make sure you get a picture of that for Mr. Dawson in the pie card? He may appreciate seeing those and having that as something available. And I'll put in a plug for Bob right now and the pie card. If you're out rail fanning, you find something interesting out there, Bob would love to have a photo of what you found out there along with a caption. Don't just send the photo and say, I took a picture.
Permission to use it.
Well, if you send that to Bob,
You gave me permission.
you gave him permission to use it. Perry, I'm going to turn it over to you. Ron had this really nice intro for you, and he didn't send it to me.
Oh
Man. So, hey,
bummer.
tell us all about you. And then it's all yours, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, and I will stick my, well, no, I'm actually sharing my presentation, so I will stick my head down in front of the camera later. I tried this moving the camera around a little bit ago, and then I put it back on where I was working because you all need to be able to see what I'm doing more than you need to see me. But my name is Perry Lamb. I am the superintendent of the Piedmont Division of the National Railroad Association. I am, what is it, 5/7 of my way towards MMR. My next certificate will probably be my author certificate because I have lots of stuff that I've been doing, especially online. But I also write regularly for our region and our division, so I get plenty of author stuff done. And then I'll spend time building cars, which will make Larry Smith very happy because he's been after me for a long time to finish my MMR. And anyway, I am a technical support engineer by trade. Discord baffles me, but I also haven't been there to look yet. But I am a technical support person, and there are things that I just don't do. So it's just the way it is. But I work in databases and I support hospitals. I teach extensively in our division. I've taught regionally. I've taught in national conventions. I enjoy teaching. It's fun. I like weathering. I like scenery. I like electricity. All those things are interesting. And I, when contacted and said, would you like to do a clinic for us? Sure, I would love to, especially if I'm not on call for work. And what would you like? And it was suggested that I do this weathering clinic. So I'm doing weathering with PanPastels, and I've expanded it beyond PanPastels because there are things that you can do with PanPastels that are great, but there are some things that look a little bit better with other stuff. So I've been adding washes and things like that to my work. It really makes the weathering look a lot better, and quite frankly, some parts of it are a lot easier to do with washes than with PanPastels. Weathering underneath the slope sheets of a hopper car with any kind of a brush, a PanPastel sponge, is difficult at best, whereas with washes you can do that in a heartbeat. And it's kind of entertaining to weather around with PanPastels around brake gear. It's not all that easy, but with washes it's a lot easier. But we'll go on from here. So this is for you all, and except you're not in the SCR, you're actually in the MCR. So I've got to fix that. And there we go. What are PanPastels? Okay, PanPastels are professional artists dry pigment pastel colors in a pan format, and I'll show you what they look like in a bit. In fact, this is one. This is a picture of this stuff that we have, and it's probably upside down of what I have sitting on my desk right now. And it's all these different things all mushed together, and they look like this. In fact, this is, I think, or very close to the one that I have sitting on my desk right now. All of these are individual cakes, and they are applied with a variety of things. You can get them as complete sets, you can get them as individual colors, and they're applied dry making them really ideal for realistic weathering effects, and you can do it very quickly. I mean, if you're really interested in doing it, you can weather a box car or a hopper car or something in mere minutes, quite literally. And we'll probably do that sitting here today. And this is the flyer from the PanPastels folks, and they talk about the actual materials themselves, the weathering sets they have, and I've bought the weathering sets, but part of what I also have in my collection of stuff, when we started teaching this as a training camp at a region meeting, at a region convention, the PanPastels folks sent me a collection of their seconds. And I've been using seconds and teaching with seconds for ages, and there has been no harm in any of the modeling. Nothing's gone wrong, nothing is weird, it all works. But there are a variety of these tools that they sell, and I'll show you in a little bit what I use very commonly to weather with, just because it's cheaper. They're compatible with spray fixatives. I'll show you, and I have a handout that I will send up to the folks who very nicely invited me to this, and I think Fred, you're on that, because that way you'll have a handout, and what I list is tools and materials for this clinic, so you can replicate it if you would like to. I do not use dull coat anymore. I found, to my liking, the texture of dull coat is far too rough for HO scale and for weathering. I've now limit myself to either Tamiya's flat finish or Mr. Hobby's flat finish, because the texture of the clear flat pigment in their flat finishes is a lot smoother. They're applied with reusable, easy to clean, non-abrasive soft sponges and cosmetic applicators. And while I don't mind advertising, and I will show you the sponges that the PanPastels people sell, I'll show you what I use very commonly. And this is the PanPastel stuff that they sell, these art sponges in various shapes. I tend to use these, but I also tend to use just cosmetic applicator sponges. And I've got a package of them sitting here next to me, and I probably have a picture of the package in the presentation as well. I'll show it to you. But these are smaller sponges that you can use. These knives and covers are very nice because you can fit them into a much smaller area, and I use those extensively, and I've got one sitting on my desk right next to me. This is the stuff that I use in addition. These are little applications, little teeny application sponges for makeup, and then these are cosmetic wedges that are bigger. Those are the wedge-shaped things that I showed here. Over here on the left, and that's what these things look like when they come in their package. The only thing I found odd about these ones when I bought them is that they were infused with vitamin E oil, and oil and weathering don't go all that well together. So I just stuck them in, I just pulled them apart and stuck them in a basin of warm soapy water in my kitchen sink, washed them, and then turned my oven on to its lowest setting. When it hit the lowest setting, I stuck the sponges on a cookie sheet, stuck them in the oven, and let them dry. And they didn't melt because it was only 100 degrees, and they came out perfectly usable and perfectly fine. So that was really easy. So the first thing we'll look at is weathering a freight car. And unless you've taken your own color photographs, stuff that you find in things like Morningstar books, or as I'll show you in a minute, in a minute or so what you can find online for modern equipment. It's nice to have photographs that you can work from. A lot easier. If you're modeling today, just get online and watch the webcams go by. If you're modeling the golden era of railroading or the transition era of railroading or whatever it is you're modeling, having books of that kind of stuff makes life a lot easier for you. So in the example that's here, this New York Central system, and your model railroad next month is a New York Central Railroad, I think, if I remember correctly. So you might very well see this. So if we pull up this New York Central boxcar and look at its weathering, you will see, and as the conversation was running along before the meeting, weathering is relentless, weathering occurs continuously, and weathering is layers. We can see that looking at this. We can see faded color. We can see that the lettering itself is fading. In fact, this is New York Central, but it's kind of hard to tell that given the way this is, the way that this has continued. But we can see the effects of weather on this car over a long period of time. So we will work to replicate that. I go to railroadpicturearchives.net when I go looking for stuff. When I sit down at my desk, I sit down with my tablet and I go Google, and I Google the reporting marks for the car I'm after. And generally the reporting marks will come up with something like this. So here's this T-box car, and sitting out wherever it was sitting at the time. I don't remember, I didn't capture that part of it, and I'm not going to take credit away from railroadpictures.net and the photographer of this, but this is this railroad car, and we can replicate this, the weathering for this car, and this car really isn't all that filthy, fairly easily. And this railroad car has not been tagged at all that I can see. And if you don't want it, and if you don't want to tag, you don't have to tag. I tag because it's what it's what I model, since I model today. So if I pick up, if I go and Google a BNSF boxcar, and that BNSF boxcar comes back with tagging on the side of it, I will try to replicate all of that in my modeling. So a few easy steps. Here's the beginning of our car. Here's our New York Central 57, 79, 74 with its fancy letter, with its fancy script. And this is what it looks like as we start with it. Remove the trucks and couplers from the car body, separate the wheels and the axles from the truck side frames. And I don't always do this. I'm a lazy modeler. So you end up with something that looks like this. With the wheels and trucks separated from the car body, spray or airbrush a light, flat, clear coat to the entire car. This will give tooth to the plastic for better pan-pastel adhesion. And you only need to apply the light, flat coat at the beginning of the process. You do not need to do so at the end, and I have a prime example of it when we get far enough along in the presentation and we get off of screen sharing. I'll show you what I mean. So you apply it. And now, like I said, I no longer use Tester's dull coat. I find, like I said, I find it too heavy. I use either Tamiya or Mr. Hobby. It's a personal preference. There's nothing wrong with Tester's flat, or the Tester's flat finish. I just don't like it. Brush paint the wheel faces and axles a chocolate brown cover because we're trying to make it look like rusty wheel sets. Brush paint the truck side frames a dark gray, and I will show you what I do instead of that now. Here are the colors that were used in this presentation, these Vallejo colors, a chocolate brown and this dark gray color. And they will work just fine. I've just kind of modified it even after this. Here's this Marion chocolate cover. And here's one that had the Marion chocolate cover color added to it. So it looks like a rusty wheel face because wheel sets are never painted. And then the gray color painted onto the side of the truck side frame, and you end up with something that looks like this: dark wheel sets and a gray side frame. Lightening, making the side frame lighter, in my eye, is really important, because what you end up with if you don't is you end up with a truck side frame and wheel sets that blend in with the shadows of our cars. And since the lighting on our model railroads is invariably never as bright as daylight outside, everything under your car is in shadow, and it looks like your car is floating in midair, 4 feet off the ground. So if you pay very close attention to lightening the underside, the running gear for your car, you bring that out, you highlight it, you draw more attention to it, and it doesn't look like your car is floating because you can actually see the trucks. So you've gotten to this point where your truck side frames are painted, your wheel sets are painted, you've put a flat finish on your car, and off we go. Put the trucks and couplers back on, because it's a whole lot easier to stand the car on its wheels and couplers, or on its wheel sets, than it is to do anything else. And unless you're looking at something really strong, like, I don't know, the car caught on fire, it's a very gradual process. And so weathering occurs over many, 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 many years. And I don't know if you can hear my doggy in the background, but my rescue is downstairs looking out the front door, barking at probably a kitty cat. Weathering models is not any different. You can apply weathering in layers, and I advocate that. And you can build up the layers slowly. If you dump a whole bunch on all at once, you can wash PanPastels off, but it isn't easy. I've done it, but I would prefer not to. So like scenery, building up slow layers, 1 layer at a time is wonderful. Doing the same thing with weathering, building up a layer at a time of weathering with PanPastels is a lot easier than taking it off. Light coat of whatever a contrasting color is. It only takes a small amount when you're working on a sponge. In fact, the sponges that you'll see on my desk when I start this process, in many cases, what's already on the sponge will work. But if you put a sponge into the color, if you rub the sponge across the color, and pick it up and start to apply to your car or a building or whatever else, and the PanPastels puff up in a cloud of dust, you have way too much on your sponge, and you'll see that. So use a light contrasting color and start working on your piece of rolling stock. Remember that weathering goes downhill like rain. And so you would start at the center of your car, the center of the roof, and work your way to the outside. And when you work down the side of your car, you start at the top of your car and work your way down. So like this picture is showing right here with one of these little makeup sponges, start at the center of the car underneath the roof walk, pulling towards the outside edge, like has started here, and you're putting on these light streaks. And then using a color that closely matches the roof, apply a second layer to tone down the white. So here's what we're doing. Here's where we're adding, first we build up a layer of the white, and then we start adding with a color that closely matches the car roof, and we're going to tone it down because we're trying to build layers and we're trying to build texture. And that's what all of this weathering is about. Wooden roof walk comes next, using gray or a light layer of black. You apply a light, you're not trying to burn the roof walk. You're just trying to blend it in, make it look like used wood. You might even use some, if it were a steel roof walk, you might use some rust on it. But we're just using light colors. Here is this Payne's gray. You could also, like the slide said, you could also use black, a very, very, very light coated black. Remembering, of course, that if you add too much black, you can always go back and A, you could try to remove some, or B, you could take a lighter color and blend over the top of it. Sides and ends of the car body, using, in this case, kind of a red oxide, working vertically down from the roof to the side sills, lightly fading logo, data, and reporting marks. And that's what we're doing here. We're using kind of a rusty color to go along with this kind of rusty color car. And we're working our way down the side of the car here over this New York Central System logo, working our way down, fading it and blending it into the car body, because this really white is very stark. And as we continue our way down the car, we can see where this gets blended in here and makes all of that weathering, or all of that lettering, look like it's faded in and is becoming dirty. Down the end of the car, we do exactly the same thing, starting up at the top of the car, working our way down. Where washes come in very handy is if we're trying to weather behind the brake wheel and the brake wheel platform and the air piping down here, and behind these ladders, behind the ladder down here, getting in behind all of these with any kind of a sponge can be a bit difficult. But if we're using a wash, we can just apply the wash down here and let the wash run downhill, like the weather, like rain and dirt and stuff would flow down the side or into the car anyway, and we arrive at where we're looking for. Rust streaks, using something like burnt sienna works before applying downhill, because the roof rusts, the galvanized roofs, even though they're galvanized and painted, they still rust. So we can start at the top of the car, up here where this rusty area is, and you just slowly and carefully drag down. You can overdo rust very quickly. I discovered that the hard way the last time I did a clinic like this, and I boo-booed, and I try not to do that again, but it happens. But the same thing, get a nice rusty color, and there's a variety of them, and you can blend them in. You can use older rust, you can use newer rust. There's different colors for that. Truck side frames and springs, once they are painted, then can get signs of rust, because they're not painted. They're not painted. But once we paint them the gray, then we can use a very tiny sponge with a very small quantity of a rusty color, and we can add it especially to things like the springs, maybe around the journal boxes if we want to, because real truck side frames are not painted. They are dirty, but they do get rusty. Final details are things like tack boards Tack boards work well with raw umber for worn wood. So we'll get out raw umber and we'll just kind of very lightly brush that vertically down over the side of the tack board and turn it into weathered raw wood, because that's the effect that we're after. You can apply pan pastels. I would suggest not, because like chalks and other weathering powders, you can obliterate the effects of your pan pastels weathering applying a light coat of dull coat or a flat finish of whatever particular variety you use. I did that not too long ago for a first time to a building that I have sitting on my desk next to me, and I'll show you in a couple of minutes. I had the roof very nicely finished. I had it exactly where I wanted it to be, and I'll show you what I did, and it annoyed the heck out of me. If you have a home layout and you weather your cars and you weather your buildings and you put them on your model railroad, and you're not in the habit of picking up your cars and carrying them in a cardboard box everywhere all the time, I would suggest never applying any layer of a flat finish to your weathered cars. The pan pastels themselves have an adhesive coating along with them. That's how they stay into into the cake. And you've applied a flat finish to your plastic model anyway, so it has tooth. I have cars running around on my railroad that have been weathered for years and show no ill effects from the random picking up and putting down. You know, if something has happened or some operator gets a bit overzealous and knocks one off the track and has to pick it up and put it back on. The closest I've ever had to come to reweathering something is the fuel tank on the frame of a diesel locomotive, because that's the only place you ever pick them up. And I have gone back and reweathered a fuel tank or two. But unless you are a modular modeler and you are always picking up and putting your cars in foam padded somethings, then I might consider a pan pastel or a flat finish over your pan pastels. But I'm not even convinced then that it's really necessary. They stick really, really well, to the point that when you try to wash them off, it's difficult. So I don't think it's really necessary. So anyway, we go from this, which is, you know, a nice looking car, to that, which is a grungy looking car that's been in service for quite some time. And it really looks quite effective. And it really takes less time than it took me to talk about it. Now, so the first thing that I look at when I start working on a car, and here's a coal hopper from a photograph that I think popped up on in an email group that I belong to. So I snagged the picture and stuck it into this slide. Here we have this kind of gray, this yucky gray color with a lot of dirt and a lot of grunge and a lot of grime on this truck side frame. And we can replicate that with washes and with pan pastels. We end up with something that looks like this. We have our truck side frame that's kind of this yucky gray color. We've got the blue from the roller bearing caps on it. We got some gunk built up here, some oil and some gunk built up here. We might have a little bit of rust in here. But this is the effect that we can achieve with pan pastels and washes. And so here is this car. And as you can see, the truck side frame here doesn't blend in and disappear in the shadows under the car, which is kind of what we need to do, because like I said in the beginning, our the lighting on our railroads isn't like it would be in the outside world. So we do kind of need to highlight the undersides, the running gear on our cars, so that our cars don't look like they're floating. So here's some examples of some weathering. Here was the truck side frame, and then some light weathering down the sides of the car, kind of blending it in and making it dirty and kind of yucky. And I continue down my list on that. Here's one of these T-box box cars, like the one that I picked up from my railroad, from the railroad archives.net bit. We can see down here that we can actually see, and this is under direct light on my workbench under good LED lighting. And even then, it's still not as bright underneath the car like it would be out in the real world under direct sunlight. So what we can do to highlight the truck side frames on our cars is a good thing. But this is the application of PanPastels. And another example of it, a bit of a different effect with some more weathering and different shades of weathering and different colors of it. And yet another one. You can do the same thing with structures. And here is a steel water tank. It's basic steel water tank. It's nice. It's a nice kind of grimy black color. We can see the water level of the tank. We can see the ladder, all that other nifty stuff. Again, we will flat coat it and then apply red iron oxide to simulate light rust, because that's what happens using one of our cheap makeup sponges. We can apply a light rust coat to it. If you want to tone that down, a very light layer of black works well. So where back here you could clearly see the rust, if we add a little bit of black to it, it tones that down, makes it look a lot nicer. Here's after a brief a light application of black, and here's the really rusty feature of it. Alkali water in older steel tanks leaches through, leaving calcified deposits through the seams, leaves something that's very easily seen. And if you look at it here, you can see where through the seams along these rivet lines, minute amounts of water leak out. But when they leak out and the water itself evaporates, leaving the minerals collect here. The minerals do that around your car, around the radiator cap. I had a bowl sitting outside and all the water evaporated, but it left the minerals in it. I've done that before when getting ready to apply decals before I switched to denatured, or excuse me, to oh bother, I forgot. Distilled water. Yes, I moved to distilled water, but before that, if I left water sitting in the little bowl that I use on my desk for soaking decals, eventually the bottom of my cup filled up with, it looked like it was all scaly with the minerals left over from regular water. So this is something we would see. Did I skip a slide? Nope, I didn't. Okay. We can do the same thing to the roof. We can fade the paint out on the roof with a light color, with a light layer of kind of a chalky, grungy gray color. We can continue our leaching down the side of the car, or down the side of the water tank, and it really looks good. I like the effect of that. Brick building, and I'll show you a live example of that in just a little bit. So here's our ice and cold storage building, and soot on the brick chimney with a layer of black. So here's a light layer of black running down the side of the chimney on the brick building, or on the brick fireplace or brick chimney. Brick dust and rust on corrugated metals is simulated using red iron oxide. And that's what we're doing down here. So here's dust and brick dust and maybe some rust running down the tops of our corrugated metal awning. So that blends that in and makes it look a lot better. And here's a closer, more detailed view of it, and it continues down all the way down to where it then drips off the edge of our awning. Vertical streaks caused by rain and soot and all the other junk that accumulates in the air and then falls out of the sky when it rains or snows. Red oxide dark, and we can continue that down the sides of the building, especially under like the windowsills. If we could see it up, probably on the back side of the building, we could see it right up underneath the eaves of the building. But all of this, all of this running down the side of the building in these corners here, next to the pilasters on the building, all of this area where water would accumulate and then run vertically downhill. This is where we can apply this darker color to make it grungy and look kind of disgusting. And a more close-up view, you can see it down the side of the building here, down the side of the building here, and off we go. Toning down or fading white sign lettering is easy with a light coat of black, like we can see here. Taking out this very bright and the E from ice, making it look a little bit grungier and darker and not so stark, because let's face it, that the decal for this sign really is bright white. We don't need that. So applying this in detail, we can see where we're turning this into kind of a grungier color. And here is a gas station that was done. Something that's interesting in this one are the oil patches down here. And I know for a fact that this was actually an accident. And I know the person who did this building, and he did a very nice job of it. And it was an accident, and it's really cool. The gas station concrete pad has been weathered with black, followed by 70% isopropyl alcohol puddled with an eyedropper. And that was actually an accident. He had weathered this and then accidentally dripped alcohol on it in one spot, and it made this really realistic oil puddle in this spot. So we did that on a couple more of the spots, and it looks good, and I like the effect. It's really cool. I mean, you could do the streaks, but the puddles really looked entertaining. There is a really neat color, and I have some sitting on my desk because the last time I did this clinic, someone said, "What is it? Can you show it to us?" It's this pearl medium black, and it's a specific PanPastel stuff that has sparkle in it. I'm not sure what it's used for in the makeup world, but for us it's perfect because you can apply that to a coal load on a hopper car or in a steam locomotive tender, and it really looks good. It adds sparkle to your coal load, and it's just amazing. And I'll show, and I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up on the camera, but I've got a pan of it sitting right next to me, and that's what I use and I apply it to the coal loads and all of my coal hoppers. They're very easy to use. You can replicate weathering effects very quickly. I'm going to abandon my presentation. I am going to stop sharing, and I guess you would want to put me on the stage.
Put you on Spotlight.
Spotlight. Okay,
Yep.
Whatever it's called. I've spotlighted your video for everyone. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because I just talked about it, this is and I don't know, like I said, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. Yeah, I can see it on my picture.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's black, but it's got that little bit of sparkle in it, and that's that variety that's done that way. Like I said, I have no clue exactly what somebody would use that for for makeup, since these are actually makeup materials, but this black, this one is coarse, but pearl medium, and that's what it is. And then these are these nifty sponges that we use for doing this cosmetic wedges. These ones are latex free, fine. So if you're allergic to latex, you won't have issues. But they're these nifty little sponges, and they come molded, they come attached like this, and you just split them apart. And I had to wash the batch that I'm using now, but off we go. And then the actual pastels themselves are in these little trays like this. This is obviously not a set. This is one that I've just stuck together and leave in this little tray, and it's the one that's up on top and in my box of all that stuff, and off we go. When I start the process, like I was saying, I either use the Tamiya, turn around so you can read it, the Tamiya flat finish. Wait a second, I got to work backwards. Okay, there we go. I either use the Tamiya flat finish, the TS80 flat finish, and not too long ago, I was in my hobby shop, and I'd run into the Mr. Hobby brand of materials, and I'd seen those on YouTube videos several times, so I bought a can of theirs. I like it, but I am still happier with the Tamiya flat finish, the TS80. So that's what I tend to use. In fact, everything that's sitting on my desk right now is done with the Tamiya stuff. The other things that I use when I'm working on this, and it's in what I will send you as part of the handout, I have these AK Interactive weathering stains. This one is mud, and this one is fuel stains. And while I'm not running fuel stains down the side of a 1/35th scale armored vehicle or 1/16th scale diesel truck, they still work really well for the side frames and stuff like that on a railroad car, on the trucks. And then I use a variety of panel liners. These are all Tamiya panel liners. This is the black panel liner from Tamiya. This is dark gray panel liner from Tamiya, and this is light gray panel liner from Tamiya. And they are really, 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 really thin. When we pull those out and show you, you'll see how thin they are. These are a little bit thicker, and I'm probably going to go after some of their thinner before too long, because I want to try some different effects with this. And so the next time I deliver this clinic, assuming I get some of their thinner, the clinic will be different because I will have changed what I'm doing.
Are those water-based?
I think they are oil-based. I'm almost certain that they are. I know that the panel liners, the Tamiya panel liners, are oil-based.
Yeah, they will lift paint if you're not careful.
Yes, which is a good reason to apply a flat finish to whatever it is you're going to work on first. So that you end up, because that will protect the paint on your material. So I will, where the heck did I put it? Well, that was entertaining. I brought one and left it someplace. Oh, bother. Let me go into here and go down into here and pull out something that's relatively unused.
Hey.
Oh, I see.
Oh, well.
A green one?
Yeah, the green one right there.
Barry,
Yes.
did you?
Yes, sir.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. I thought I had brought a micro brush with me, and I'm not going to run downstairs and interrupt this. I'm just going
It's
to.
under your towel.
It's under your towel.
It is under my towel?
By the
Oh,
washer.
it rolled away. Thank you, Microbrush. Thank you for looking upside down underneath my. So what I will do is I will take some of this fuel stain bit and I'll just dip some of it out and I'll just cover my truck side frame with it. Now, something that you will see me do that you may think is goofy, but I've discovered it kind of adds to the grunginess. Give me a moment to finish this part of it. So I've got a nice sloppy coat of this fuel stain on the side frames of these trucks. And now I am going to get an ugly sponge and I'm going to go get kind of a lighter gray or a grungy color of chalk of pan pastel, and right over my my wash of fuel stain, I'm going to apply pan pastels on the wet finish. And to me, it kind of helps it kind of embed itself into the truck side frame. And as it dries, it kind of forms this sort of crusty layer, like rusty, grungy, built up dirt. And when dry, what you will find is like what I showed you in the picture of the truck side frame in the PowerPoint presentation, you end up with a grungy side frame. And I like the effect. So I've added a couple layers now of different pan pastels to the truck side frames here. And once I turn this back around, after the second layer of pan pastels on the truck side frame, and I hold this up to you, it's kind of that, it's kind of a, at least to my eye here, it's kind of a grayish, grungy color. And as that dries, I'll go back later and add more layers to it. When I get ready to start rusting the side of the car, I'll go back and very lightly highlight the truck side frame with a really light rust color. But that's the start of a side frame. And so I don't end up spilling stuff all over the place. Put that out of the way. Grab my railroad car.
We've never done that.
Yeah,
Everybody was saying they've never done that. They've never knocked off a bottle.
yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah, I've never knocked a bottle over either, which is why I'm moving it out of the way, because I don't want it all over my work desk. Because this is my work, and that would be a pain. Okay, so I've started on the truck side frames. I want the truck side frames to dry for a little bit, and the wash will dry in the not, you know, and it won't take it too long to dry, but the side frames will dry. So I'm going to start now on the roof of this car, and I'm going to start at the process where we were in the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to get one of my really ugly sponges, and I'm going to go after a kind of a darker, grungy, yucky color, and I'm going to start at the top of the car. Now, weathering the running boards on this hopper car don't run down the center of the car because, of course, the roof hatches are up there. So I will take this kind of grungy, yucky color, and I'm going to start at the center of the roof and work my way across the top of the roof, just dragging this stuff across the top of the car, across the roof walks, across the roof hatches, and I'm going to turn it around and go in exactly the opposite direction, doing exactly the same thing, because I want it to fade off to the side of the car as I work my way down. And then I can take one of the smaller knives and start and do the same thing underneath the edges, the front edges of the roof walk itself, and work my way down the side of the car. And I'll start at the other end and work my way back, so that hopefully when I get to the center, I have just about the same amount of pastel on the knife blade as it towards the center as I did on the ends, so that the ends in the middle all look just about the same. And I'll do the same thing, working my way down on the other side of the roof walk and heading back in the opposite direction. Okay, then I might take, let's see, let's pick out another one, and maybe kind of a lighter, maybe a lighter gray color. And I'm just going to very lightly brush a much lighter blending color over the top of that. And the nice thing is, let me do this again. It came out a little bit heavy here, but if I take the sponge and turn it around and drag it back over it again, it begins to blend it in with everything else that's on here. So you don't get the really stark white when you're done. You get this faded, washed out blending of colors across the roof of the car. Take the car, turn it around. The little bit heavier amount that's on my brush now, or on my sponge now, run it across the top of the car. And as we can see, it gets really heavy all of a sudden. But then if I turn the sponge around and drag back over it, it blends all of that in with the rest of the car. So we have fading, we have dirt, we have grime, we have, for lack of a better term, we have yuck, because that's what we're after. I don't know how else to describe it. And we can start the same thing now down the sides of the car. Since I've most recently applied a light color to the roof, I think I'm going to repeat that down the side of the car and kind of fade the side of the car, assuming that it's been out in the sun for a while. And the moment a car comes out of the paint shop, it starts to fade because the sun is relentless. And I'm going to go down both sides of the car with this, what's left on my sponge with the white, fading it down the sides of the car. And because I don't want my car to be overly white, I'm going to grab some of a darker, kind of a darker, rustier color, and I'm going to drag it down the side of my car after the white. Except I'm doing this the wrong way. I should be left-handed. So let me turn it back around this way, get my kind of grungier red color, and go back down the side of the car over the white with the grungier red color. And so now I've got kind of a layering of grungier of the red and the white blending together, fading out and making the side of the car dirty. And if I'm interested in something in particular, and I'm going to experiment and probably hate myself, but I'm going to do it anyway. If I really want to show that some portion of this car was damaged and is and the paint's been removed, somebody banged into it with something, we can do a rust streak down the side of the car. So we've got a little bit of rust running down the side of the car here, right in this spot here. If I think that that's too heavy, I can go back to where I was working before with a little bit of the lighter color and drag over it. And then I can go back with a little bit of the darker, rustier color and go back over that. So I can build up layers of rust over and then the dirt over the rust. And if I really wanted to, I could go in and add a dark rust to it and have older dark rust and newer dark rust down the center of it. You can build up layers like that, and that's part of the joy of working with something like this. Yes, you can also do that with an airbrush, but we teach this, I teach this anyway, because A, not everybody has an airbrush. B, a lot of people are intimidated by airbrushing. C, let's face it, it takes time to airbrush, because not only do you have to A, airbrush whatever it is you're doing, B, you need to clean your airbrush, because otherwise you end up with a gunky, unusable, totally worthless airbrush. So I can do this without an airbrush, and I still achieve results that I'm pleased with in a quarter of the time or something. I'm not so happy because I have this big white splotch in the middle of my car. So if I blend that in a little bit, so I still got the rust fade, the new rust in here, but everything else I blended in and faded, so that works there. Now, the ends of the car, and this is where I was talking about and why I started experimenting with panel liners and washes, is because weathering up underneath here, up underneath the slope sheets, turn it around this way, up underneath the slope sheets on a hopper car, or if we pick this up and look at underneath the edges or around the safety bars on this tank car, can be entertaining. Now, I can grab some of, some grungy color and very carefully get parts of underneath the slope sheets, but then I run into the safety bars in here and I run out of ability to reach clear down into here. And I certainly can't get in here really well in where here on the B end where the brake rigging is, getting back into here to weather up underneath here just doesn't work very well. So I will take, and I'm going to start with a lighter one. Now, granted, what's underneath the slope sheets on a hopper car doesn't fade due to sunlight as much as it just gets grimy and dirty. So I'm going to take, and I guess you can see this. This is really whoops, hold it down here. This is really thin. I mean, this is mostly thinner. There is not very much pigment in here. So if I take the little brush of this and I just dab it inside here and up underneath the slope sheets, like I would light layers, like I would PanPastels, I can build up layers of grime, because that's what's really going to be under here. There's not going to be, as like I said, there's not going to be as much fading. There's just going to be yuck up underneath here. So I've started with light gray, and I'm going to let that sit there for a bit. And I start at the top and I just let it run downhill. It's really good at that. And I'm going to go back down here to the A end of this car. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to repeat myself. I'm just going to add gunk. And if I'm not happy with the medium gray, I can always go back and add some black. But taking out this is a lot harder than taking out PanPastels. So getting back there to clean it out would be really difficult. So I'm not sure if you all will be able to see. Oops, there we go. It's wet, but I don't know how well you can see the gray. Yeah, not really. I'm not happy with the medium gray under there. So I'm going to close the medium gray, shake up the black, because I want I want it to be gunkier. I mean, I know it's a cement hopper, and I actually should have thought about that before I started weathering, because I need to add more white to it. But I'm going to add just a little bit of black underneath the stiffening ribs on the underside of the slope sheets in here. Just, oops, that was a boo-boo. I gotta go fix that.
But it's weathering. Weathering habits. That's right.
And I got to go clean up what I got on the outside of the car. So I'm just going to take a sponge and rub down the outside of the car, because I actually accidentally got some on the outside of my car where I really don't want it. So if I just drag a sponge down the outside of the car, okay, again, it still may be kind of hard to see, but
Yes.
to my eye, it is wait a second, keep going up and then tilt it just right. To my eye, live and in person, it's a lot darker than it was before. And that's what I'm after underneath the slope sheets on this car. I know to you it may look just shiny, but to me it's a lot darker, it's a lot grimier, and I don't have to try to reach up underneath and behind all of the brake rigging on the slope sheet of this car to make that part of it all dirty. Now, I have not done the ends of the car where the road numbers are, the reporting marks are. So if I get a sponge, load it up with something on the sponge and just run it up here underneath the very ends of the car. Of course, I'm doing this backwards again. Okay, we fade out the reporting marks there. We fade out the reporting marks here. And we're close. The only thing left to do is to get an ugly one and maybe a little bit of rust and put it on the coupler, because you can do that, and the PanPastel will not affect operations of your KD couplers. Okay. Now, back to my side frames on my truck side frames. They've been sitting for a while and they've been drying. So now I'm going to take a little bit of rust on the truck side. I'm just going to take a little bit of a rusty color and apply it to the outside of where the truck side frames were a lot wider than I like them to be. And I'm just going to add a little bit of dark rust to them. And so now I've got a layer of wash and 3 layers of PanPastels on my truck side frames. So I have now, I think, something fairly reasonable for the side frames of my trucks. The only thing I would probably do now, given what this car actually holds, and I have not decided to do something like this before, so this is going to be an experiment. Just very lightly around the hatches where someone might have spilled powdered cement. I don't know. Drag something along it that's darker. I don't know. That's an experiment.
You get it with some of that Tamiya flat and that'll fix it.
That it would. That it would. Now, bringing that up, I'm working away diligently on a church that I'm actually going to name, or actually I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to name the church for the church that my first cousin, she's just been installed as the pastor for her first ever church, and I'm going to dedicate this church to her, and it's going to go live on my railroad. I started the weathering on the roof of my church with washes because I wanted to have the shingles stand out, and the panel liner washes are really good for that. Once I was done with the panel liners and they dried, I started down the roof with PanPastels. When I was all done doing all of that weathering, I installed the cross on top of the steeple. Let me get it to a point where you can see it. Okay. And the cross on the top of the steeple was really bright white. I had painted it already, but it was too bright to my eye. So I got out my can of Tamiya flat and sprayed the top of the cross, which I have since banged. Anyway, and I thought, okay, an experiment, because you got to be you can't be afraid to experiment too much. I applied a layer of flat finish to the roof of my church and almost completely obliterated all of the PanPastels that I'd put on it. And I was most annoyed. I took pictures of it because I wanted to remember it, and I posted about it on Facebook, and I said, never, never, never again. And I had to go back and re-weather the roof of my car, or the roof of my church, because I had toasted it, and I was not a happy camper. Sigh. So that leads me to probably decide that's not something that I really want to do, but I don't know. But I did the rest of it. When I started on this, and I kind of like the effect, and it's something that I've learned about in my armor modeling, I pre-shaded the walls of the church with white. White rattle can spray paint. And so before the foundation was underneath them, before the windows were in it, and before the roof was on it, I sprayed almost the entire building with white spray paint. And then I came back and did a very light airbrushed coat of a brick color. And so that leaves, to my eye, more of a brick mortar mortar color behind the layers of brick. And then the colors, the red color that I used for, I don't remember what color it was, downstairs in the basement someplace, to airbrush. I like the way that it turns out. And I've done this now for a couple of different structures, pre-shade it with white, and then paint it with a nice dark brick red color. And then I've done weathering on top of it with layers of grunge and some darker red rust colors to kind of blend things together and highlight other areas. And I kind of like the effect of it. And so that's what I've done for that. I have also in the past pre-painted a roof with a darker gray color. I think, in fact, this one I pre-painted with Tamiya German gray or something, something that you might find on an older World War II version of a German armor. And that's the base color for the roof on that building. And then I go back and weather over the top of it with everything else. Okay.
Hey, Perry, before you start another project here, we've been going a bit over an hour now, and we do have a layout tour this afternoon.
Okay.
So if it's okay with you, I think guys have a few questions for you, and maybe we can wrap up then. How's that sound?
Speak.
Questions from the audience here in the room? Everybody wants to know where we can find Mr. Hobby Flat Finish.
I bought mine at Hobbytown, but you can, I know you can get it online.
Okay, cool. Good. Any other questions from the room? Not a one. Wow. Mr. Lasher, questions?
No, the panel liner is something I've become fairly fond of. I don't know if you remember the L&N caboose that submitted for the contest, I think last year. That was a miserable resin kit, but use that panel liner along the bottom edge, and it just sucks up between the planks randomly.
Yep.
And turned out to make a very nice aged wooden car effect, and I've used that on several other things since then. And the only thing about it is it's a solvent based thing. It will lift paint if you get too carried away with it.
Yep. But for things like the doors on the end of this container, I could just run a little bit of panel liner in them, and it brings out and helps accentuate whatever those lines are. So when I get ready to do my box car here, I will run panel liner down the doors and down the door closure bars on this car, and it will highlight and help accentuate those things. It's very nice for that.
Well, Perry, I noticed that you held up a can of a rattle can of dull coat, and I'm a big fan of dull coat. But for years and years and years, I've just bought it in the bottle and then dilute it ever so slightly with lacquer thinner. Now, if it seems to be very touchy about air pressures and distance from the model and so forth, and the thinning ratios. Yeah. But I do like the Tamiya flat finish. I'm going to use that more and more.
I really like it. And so last night I went out to the garage and took the two tank cars and the containers and my and that hopper car, and gave them all a light coat of flat finish and let them sit out in the garage for a while and dry while I came upstairs and hauled stuff upstairs for the rest of this.
Cool.
I don't know
any other questions from anybody else out there? Well, Perry, thank you very much. I think everybody learned a ton of stuff. Absolutely.
Oops.
Here, hang on. Ton of stuff, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing that handout from you, and I'll send it out to everybody in the division when it comes in.
As soon as I get off the chat, I will send it out.
Thank you, sir. Any parting comments for us?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you again for spending the afternoon with you. All right, we'll see you later. Thank you, Perry. Bye-bye.
Bye.